Hello, I'm 3 minutes behind the scheduled time. Wilmot has joined. That's nice to see you with your rightful name today, Wilmot. Glovebox, David. I'm a little bit late. I went live and realised that I was on the wrong Instagram account. I wasn't on the English one, I was on the Sheds one. So I am here as scheduled. Dicko's putting the baby to sleep but shall join us at some point. My apologies, Liam, for my poor timekeeping. I'm sporting the dog look this evening. These filters have grown on me, so cat to dog, and it's all good. Right, so as promised, this evening's schedule is looking at My Lost Duchess and also looking at tissue. I think there's been a bit of a hype around the UTC and around the country. See the ears when I did that. And a lot of people are concerned, and they're feeling as though, it might be tissue, and everybody sort of dreads that. So here's your opportunity to hit me up with any questions that you have about tissue. It's a hard one, I can't lie. Yeah, I think a lot of people share that, but to be honest with you, all you need for the pass here is 3 or 4, a range of points, 3 or 4 really good points. It's actually not that hard. If we look at tissue, I hope you've got your anthologies in front of you. I'm sort of like going off the bat here a little bit. But all you have to know about tissue is the idea, the whole poem's an extended metaphor. So it's looking at the idea that if, you've done the hard work to get this. If you get A Christmas Carol, if you get the whole thing of Scrooge was dark in his shell, in an oyster, solitary as an oyster, the darkness, and he didn't want to embrace the light. It's the same thing really with tissue. So if you look at the opening line, you've got paper that lets the light shine through. Now, all you need to understand for this poem is that Darker, the poet, that's quite interesting. Dark, light. Don't talk about that, Liam, okay? Darker, the poet, opens with paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. To alter something is to change it. So off the back of yesterday, when we looked at William Blake's London, the idea of revolution, calling people to revolution, it's the idea that actually things need altering. This is what could alter things. Things need to change. So remember, if you struggle with a poem, look at the opening, look at the ending, say a few things about the middle as a minimum. So this is what could alter things. And just like Glovebox picked up there, that light imagery method is carried on the whole way through. So paper that lets the light shine through. And it's so clear in that last line, she talks about our skin, that we are living tissue. So that paper, that tissue is a metaphor for the human. So that's all you need to know really. You've got the whole idea of maps too. She says the sun shines through their borderlines. So again, it's this idea that us as humans, we might try and control things. We might put borders in place, money, checkbooks, economy. But at the end of the day, we're all human. And we're all people. So you've got this idea of paper that lets the light shine through, people who let their light shine and their goodness. No matter where we're from, the sun shines through their borderlines. And what you'll notice in tissue is the way that she uses light imagery. She doesn't say that light shines on. It's twice in the poem there. She says the sun shines through. And actually, a bit later in the poem, she actually mentions let the daylight, again it's light imagery, break through. And if you're thinking thoughtful, detailed, kind of grade 6, that's the idea of a breakthrough. Perhaps, possibly, could be. So it's really quite simple. You've got the light imagery the whole way through. You've got the idea that things need altering and changing. And we talked about this a little bit, that she talks about if buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. If you feel someone's drift, you get them. So again, it's that the buildings represent hardness, harshness, all the rigidity, like in Blake's London, the rigid, the blackening church, the walls that guard the palace, that rigid sense of power and political structure. So she's just saying, we're fragile, we're soft, we're paper. But if you place literally layer over layer, it's another quote you've got there, layer over layer, script over luminous script. And the word luminous obviously means light again. So it's the idea that there's a light, a power, a strength within us, and that we all need to come together to stand up against harshness. Oh, I'm sorry, Emily Golden, am I boring you? Dicko is putting the baby to sleep, but she will be here shortly. So I was off on one a little bit there, but please feel free to hit me up with any comments about tissue. I don't know if all that I've just gone through has helped. David Scavies, you said it was quite difficult. I don't know if that's helped at all, but certainly light imagery, look at the opening, look at how it ends. Hey Dicko. Hey Nancy. Hello Scarlett. Hello Taylor. Okay, so tissue. Quite a modern poem. You'll notice in the anthology the poems are sort of ordered, I think, by the date that they're written. So they go from sort of the oldest to the more modern. So you'll see that tissue's a more modern poem compared to the ones that we looked at yesterday. So, yeah. The other one we said we'd look at today is My Last Duchess, Robert Browning. Again, mixed feelings about that, really. I think some people are like, yeah, that would be a good one. Other people sort of not so sure. So again, if you have got any questions that you want to ask about that, my advice will always be the same. You've got 15 poems and we know that it could be any one of them. Now, when you're in that exam, you're able, again, 10 minutes to read the poem they've given you. And during that time, you've got the opportunity. You can sit there and think, okay, look at the opening, look at the ending, look at the title, look at some images from the middle, and you can work out methods. Actually, you can work out methods while you're sat there, but what you can't work out while you're sat there is the historic context and the background and what that poet is really trying to get across. So that's what I'd say predominantly your revision should be at the minute, making sure that you've got a bit of a feel. You know, Blake's London, people were downtrodden by the government. The French poor people had had enough. They'd taken up arms. They were fighting against the government, and I think Blake wanted to inflict some of that fighting spirit on them. Shelley, Ozymandias, he was known for not being a fan of power and corruption in power. So again, he's kind of showing that kind of power falls down. So we're looking at darker as well. It's that similar mindset, even though it's a little bit later. So Glovebox has got here, actually Taylor Meekham's any key quotes from tissue. Well, we've been over tissue, so if you have a look, Taylor, once this video is finished, you can go back and there's some quotes there from the light imagery the whole way through and buildings that we've talked about. So absolutely, Glovebox is picking out, it's all one stanza. It's a dramatic monologue. That's a good term to remember. My Last Duchess is written in role as the Duke. Robert Browning's not the Duke, but the Duke was a real man. The Duke of Ferrara, a powerful man, and his wife, a bit younger than him, quite a bit, died under suspicious circumstances. So it's this idea that it's all about him. It's all about him. It's written in role as him. It's all one stanza. He's going on and on and on. Now, opening versus ending, that poem opens with that's my Last Duchess painted on the wall, and he's got this painting and it's, you know, behind a pair of curtains, and every now and again he'll open the curtains up and show the picture. So it's that sort of possessiveness of her even in death. So you've got that's my Last Duchess to start with, and the very last word in that poem is me. So it's that whole idea of self-centered power, very like Ozymandias, you know, to build that massive statue in Shelley's poem, to have that erected, and that, you know, that was a real man, to have it inscribed with the inscription, I am Ozymandias, King of Kings, is very similar, a similar sense in Browning's poem, where the Duke is talking about his name, you know, King of Kings in Ozymandias, but here he's saying, you know, my gift. Think about that. My gift of a 900-year-old name. His wife should feel that just having his name, just being married to him, is a gift. and she should appreciate that and value it above all else. So it's this sense of superiority. You get the image of stooping. The verb stoop is used. To stoop is to go down to someone's level. So all the way through we get that sense that he feels that he is above her. So when's our next English exam? So next week on Thursday? Friday. It's up in my classroom wall, but I'm having a mental breakdown. Thursday, thank you, Tyler. Thursday, it absolutely is. So we've got a Pidgin English lesson this week, Friday, but we will be doing these poems nightly so that you guys can check in and ask any questions. So he commands his listener, Glovebox is picked up to sit. You know, he dresses it up in really polite language. Well, please you sit and look at her. But they don't really have that much choice. So again, ask yourself, why is he there? Who's he talking to? He's about to meet his new wife. So we could perceive that idea of, you know, look at the picture of my old wife. Is it some kind of warning, you know, that if this new person doesn't obey me in the same way? He says in the poem, I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped. So it's this idea that it was widely believed at the time that he had her killed. So it's that power and that expectation that she will do as she's told. So will we be doing the poems in school as well though? So you've got some poetry planned for Monday, so that would be sort of snap revision, just going through, making sure that we know what named poem, if we get this named poem, this is what we'll compare it to. So I definitely, good tip there from Dicko. You've got this idea, remember the narrator, the person who the poet is in role as. So for example, Browning in My Lost Duchess, he writes as though he's the Duke. He isn't, he's taking on that role. So it's showing the examiner that you have an awareness of who the poet is and what they're doing. And when you're in there, your focus is on those methods, the language methods, the structural methods, and it's knowing the difference. You know, when we look at exposure, we'll talk about the fact that Wilfred Owen was writing in role as him. He's a soldier, he's experienced that's real, that he's there. But obviously sometimes poets take on roles, and certainly in My Lost Duchess, it's an example of taking on a role. Absolutely. Brilliant point there from Abe. Absolutely, David. So the reference to Neptune, I know we revised that from Beth, a beautifully strong image. If you Google it, you can see that picture of Neptune, the god of the sea, the Roman god of the sea, taming a seahorse. So he talks about it. It's very cleverly done, but the narrative voice, he's walking along and he's like, oh look, there's a sculpture, a little statue made of bronze that Claus of Innsbruck had cast for me. So again, it's for me. It's the idea that these things are being done for him. But just think about that as an image. That's a method, the image of this god of the sea taming a wild seahorse. And we're not talking about those cute little creatures. We're talking about a wild horse, a galloping horse, a mythical creature who lives in the sea. So it's again the narrator comparing himself to a god. He perceives himself. It's that hubris, isn't it? Again, that pride to a god. And again, very similar to Shelley's Ozymandias, where you've got this man, this mortal man. Yeah, he's a king, but he's a human. And he's having this massive colossal statue built in his honour. You know, look on my works, and it's towering above others. So both of those characters that the poets are presenting us with perceive themselves as being godlike. And certainly in Shelley's poem, it's the idea that if you do that, you know, nature will bring you down. So it's showing us how power can corrupt people, essentially, and give them illusions of being above everybody else. So that was a great point. Absolutely brilliant there. I'm boring Shanice, I think. So she wants Dicko in the house. Hello, Jack. How, brilliant point. How. Every English question starts with the word how. Compare how the poets present, and you'll get that theme. So how just means methods. The poet opens with, in My Lost Duchess, an immediate sense of ownership. That's my Lost Duchess, painted on the wall, looking as though she were alive. The poet ends with this strong image of Neptune, the god of the sea, taming a seahorse. So not only is he comparing himself to a god there, but is he comparing his wife to some kind of animal that needs taming? You know, she needs to be obedient. She needs that wildness taken out of her. So that's a really, really good point, actually. The power of it all. So my object, really good point there from Tyler, actually. So his new wife, I mean, this is madness. He's talking about his old wife. That's my last Duchess. The poem itself is called My Last Duchess. He's off to meet his new one. And at the end, he actually says, you know, his fair daughter, this new beautiful woman, is my object. Just think about that as a quote, referring to your new wife, your life partner, as your object. So you've got loads to go with there. If that was your named poem, you have a careful read through. My advice really is to for you to learn one of the power related poems, you know, about power, whether that's political power or the power of a person, one war poem that you know really well, and one poem that deals with the power of nature. So we'll go through all of them in the lead up to the exam, but if you're confused or you want any help with any of that, just come and grab one of us in each team. We're more than happy to sit down with you and discuss that. So a power poem, a war poem, a nature poem that you know well, that you don't need in front of you. And as long as you know the background to the others, you can sit and you've got that 10 minutes to really look at the opening, the ending, you know, light imagery, dark imagery, contrast, juxtaposition, just some bits from the middle. So you could also say he feels that women need to be tamed. Another really thoughtful point, so this idea of gender, this idea of men ruling society, and the idea that a woman's role is to be obedient. If there's any wildness or free spirit, then it needs taming in some way. So I think that's really, 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 really thoughtful. Why is which I've not in brackets? Tyler, I love these thoughtful questions, and I'm so glad you asked that, actually, because we didn't touch on this in London. If you're tuned in, you've got a benefit over the people that aren't tuned in, because what gets you the grade 6s and the 7s is being thoughtful. It's also being detailed, thoughtful or detailed. If you do both, you'll probably get a 7. And that kind of detail is looking at things that like that you've just picked out there, Tyler. So I'm going to answer that. But if we look back at Blake's London, for example, you'll notice that he's used capitals for certain words. So again, ask yourself, why is that? The capitalisation of soldier, infant. I'm doing this from memory now, actually, so be interesting to see in the AQA Ethology if they've actually honoured that. But it's the idea that each person in London is important. Now, what you'll notice, this will impress an examiner, is in the AQA anthology, they haven't used a capital for infant, soldier, all these little groups of people. It's been adapted slightly. That in Blake's original, those words were capitalised. So showing you know that and you're thinking about that, you could say Blake originally, when he wrote this, used capital letters for those, which signifies that actually, even though those in power are putting their foot down and ruling and oppressing people, even these kind of poor, vulnerable pockets of society have importance, and Blake gives them that by using a capital. When it says every infant's cry, there's no apostrophe. Now, at primary school, they'll teach you, if something belongs to someone, you use an apostrophe. But the absence of that in Blake's London conveys the idea of ownership, that the poor people don't even own their own fear. This is very high-level stuff, so I'm sorry if I'm sort of losing you, but it's important to talk about it. So that's the kind of thoughtfulness and the kind of detail. Again, in the AQA anthology, they've made it so that it makes more sense. But if you show that you understand, in Blake's original, this was the case. So by all means, come and speak to a teacher if you want to know more about that. So just to go back to that, why is which I have not in brackets. Now, if I remember rightly, I'm not even looking. The Duke is saying there that even if he had skill in speech, and then he says, which I've not. Now, that's interesting because the monologue that Browning has written, this poem, is very well written. He sounds like he's good at speaking, but he's putting there in brackets, which I've not. You know, even if I had skill in speech, and he's talking about speaking to his wife there. Even if I was a good talker and I could talk to her, which I'm not, well, clearly we can see as a reader that that's not true. So I think what Browning's getting at there is the idea that perhaps these wealthy, powerful people will mislead us. Perhaps these wealthy, powerful people will say one thing when actually if we look, we can see it's not true. So again, you'll need to decide if that's something you want to talk about, but it's him putting in little references to kind of mislead us, I think. But again, it's down to you to have a little think about what you think that means. But brilliant question, and so good to be thinking about that idea. So Tyler's asking there about the repetition of brackets. Repetition of brackets? Not sure what you mean there, Tyler. But feel free to clarify with a comment and I will do my best to answer your question. What poem would I compare tissue to? If I was given a tissue poem, I think London or Ozymandias. London or Ozymandias, it's this whole idea that Shelley and Blake and Darker, all three of them, only compare two, but all three of those poets are criticising power. They're showing us how power, in Shelley and Blake's case, that power's corrupt. King Ozymandias, the government in Blake's London, the blackening church, that people in power are treating people without power very, very badly, and that's not acceptable. Now, Darker in Tissue, she does it differently, but it's the same point. What she's saying is, paper that lets the light shine through, this is what could alter things. So that idea of alter, change, things need changing. The way that our system works needs changing. So that's definitely what I would do. She talks about if buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. And she says, see how easily they fall away on a sigh. You've got a reference to a sigh also in Blake's London. I mean, that's a really kind of discriminating comparison between the two. They both reference sighing. In Blake's London, you've got the soldier, the hapless soldier's sigh. Soldiers are strong, but even the soldiers are fed up. And in Darker's poem, she's saying that buildings, these rigid political structures, see how easily they fall away on a sigh. Now, this is deep, but if I sigh, it's not going to do much. But if every single person, for example, in this country or on this planet collectively, that's powerful. It's the idea of layer over layer again, that these strong buildings can easily fall. If the buildings represent governments and power, they can easily fall. So it kind of links to what was happening in France at the time Blake wrote the French Revolution, that if we come together, if we place layer over layer, that fragile paper becomes strong, and a sigh, can easily cause the downfall of a whole power structure. Quite deep, but I hope that answers your question. Brackets hiding the truth, love it, really nice point there. I'm still boring Shanice. Emily's aching. Good on you, Ems. Nice bit of gym to work off the stress of the day. Humans versus nature. So tissue to London, call to arms revolution, absolutely. Again, that's another stance you can take with tissue. You've got that light imagery the whole way through, and it's the idea that the sun shines on everyone. Maps too. The sun shines through their borderlines. So actually, as people, we can create these borderlines and we can create systems, but the reality is, nature, the sun, the natural order, that is above everything. And I suppose ideas like that put us in the territory of extract from the prelude, which is something that we'll do on another day. So certainly a good point there from Dicko. Are we going to do Pigeon English? Yes, we are, Liam Wilmot. Yes, we are. Tomorrow we are pigeoning it up. Very good. A few people have asked me, what if we get a question on the pigeon? So I'll put together something on that and send that out to you. So absolutely a good start with paper one. Tyler's asking about the curtain. Oh, okay, interesting. The brackets again. Since none puts by the curtain, I've drawn for you but I. Now, just think of it as an image there, Tyler. You've got a painting of his last wife, and he's about to meet his new one. And he hasn't just got this painting up. He's a bit annoyed about this painting because he notices what he calls a spot of joy. A spot of joy in her cheeks. He knows that she was in a room alone with the painter who painted her. And he's like, how come her cheeks look a bit flushed, a little spot of joy? How come her eyes look a little bit passionate? So he's starting to get a bit paranoid. It's that kind of sexual jealousy. And it's almost as though even in death, he feels that he's possessing her. He's got this painting of her, but he's got it behind curtains. And only he can, it's power, isn't it? Only he can open those curtains. So by putting that in brackets, I think it's quite clever because it's an important point. But it's almost as though it's put in brackets to give the illusion that the Duke's trying to emphasise, well, it's not that important. No one opens the curtains but I. He just gives it as an extra bit of information. But the reality is that we can learn a lot from that. So the brackets are an interesting feature. And certainly something, if you want to have a chat with one of your teachers about, we could really, really delve into that at some point tomorrow or before the exam. But brilliant question, and absolutely well spotted. Sighing but not doing anything. So you've got, again, the hapless soldiers sigh. Maybe Blake is feeling frustration here. Quite looking forward to doing Charge of the Light Brigade because I think there's a hint of that there as well. The idea of the frustration of people that are just not doing anything. They can see that something's not right, but they're not doing anything about it. And again, darker, see how easily they fall away on a sigh if we can just come together and challenge power. How shall I say when he speaks about his wife? Could you say he questions whether to make her sound good or not? Questions whether she'd gain confidence from it. Questions whether to make her sound good or not. It's interesting that I think you could argue whatever point you wanted to argue as long as you've got the evidence there. I would say that he makes her seem kind of untrustworthy. He talks about the idea of she thanked men, but she thanked them too well. He also says in there that her looks went everywhere. So the idea that she's looking at other men. You make of that what you will, really. I mean, is that a way of him justifying? Potentially, because it was never proven, but she died under suspicious circumstances. So is that a way of kind of justifying, or is it Browning's way of hinting that he actually ordered for her to be killed, you know, like Macbeth did to Banquo? And this idea, he says, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped. So it's that idea when on the surface of it seems that he gave commands to her, because that's what husbands do. But could it be that he gave commands, you know, in the same way Macbeth did? Did he give commands to some kind of hitman, some kind of, you know, person to kill her? So interesting. Yeah, we don't want her to get too much confidence, and that all goes back to that image of Neptune taming a seahorse, the idea that women need taming, and that wildness and that confidence, as you say, taken out of them. So poppies we would do another time. So happy with the lit paper, really good. Let's sort of skim through. So definitely what I'll do at some point is get Dicko to put a post up and we'll say which poems we're doing on which evening. So it's that momentum now in the lead up to the exam. I would definitely recommend that while we do this, that you make some notes, that you have a read of the poem before we talk about it now. In future, that you go back and have a little look at the end, and just remember that as your top tip: the opening, the ending, and some images from the middle as well. So I don't know, hopefully that fills you with a little bit more confidence. Again, we've talked about this, glove box picked it out, that the poem is in one stanza. So it's all about him. He's going on and on and on and on and on. It's all about him. It opens with my, it ends with me. It's possessive, and it's this idea of it being his voice only. That's the important voice. Now, the thing about tissue, because we've looked at tissue this evening as well, in terms of, you know, rhyme and things like that, The stanzas are there, that they're 4 lines a stanza, and that's like 4 lines, 4 lines, 4 lines, 4 lines. What you notice then is that the final stanza in Tissue is just 1 line. It's just 4 words, and those words tell us everything. I didn't understand this poem when I first read it. I don't think anyone does. Once I got it, I loved it. So at the end she says, turned into your skin. And that forces us to read the whole thing again and think, what's she on about? What? Tissue? Paper? But when you read it again and you think, okay, living tissue, you know, turned into your skin. All right, well, this is about us. Living tissue. I'm no science teacher. That's skin. So actually this poem is about us as the human. And again, we look and go, okay, paper that lets the light shine through. People who let light and good and love and joy shine through. And someone in my class said, well, if she says, if buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. It's this idea, if paper means us human, maybe governments and political structures need to be a bit more human in their approach and a little bit kinder. So structurally, that's interesting. On a deeper level, I'm going to go back to that reference. If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. See how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. Now, it's very subtle, but those of you going for sort of grade 7s might pick up on that. The idea that drift and shift rhyme. So when she says, I might feel their drift, see how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. It's almost as though her words there find a rhythm. Shift, drift, we just start to find a rhythm. Is she saying that if all of us come together collectively and sigh and say we've had enough, that actually that's when real change will happen, and that's when we start to fall into a rhythm. So if you're going for a 7, I know some of you are, do a little YouTube search for Russell Brand's interview with Jeremy Paxman, Paxman, where he talks about government and how he has no faith in government and he feels that we need a complete revolution. So again, if you're thinking at a really high level, I'd recommend definitely checking that video out. We're all aiming at least 6s, and if we miss and get a 5, great, and if we miss and get a 4, not bad at all. So everything that I go through, everything that we're pushing with you is really, really pushing at the higher end here, so that, you know, success, we've absolutely got this. Okie doke. So what we got, I get confused with that quote. I see it as catch my drift. It's not confused, that's exactly what it is, Liam. Catch my drift. If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. Now, if you get the word feel mixed up with the word catch, honestly, no one cares. The examiner will just be happy that you've got a textual reference and you get the message. You are not going to lose marks for getting one word wrong from a quote that you've picked out of your memory as your remembered poem. So please don't worry about things like that. They are absolutely not important. So the named poem will be printed there, so there's no risk of getting that wrong. It's in front of you. But if you were to choose Tissue as your chosen second poem, or any other poem for that matter, the references, just do the best that you can to reference the text and remember those keywords and key images. Russell Brand and Jeremy, Jeremy, Paxman, Paxman. So Russell Brand there's talking about how he doesn't vote, and Jeremy Paxman just goes in on him and says, how dare you have an opinion if you can't even be bothered to vote? And he talks about how he has no faith in the current political system. I would argue that it's very much like Tissue. It's this idea that, you know, this is what could alter things, that things need to change, things need to alter. These rigid buildings, if you think about buildings, you've got like Big Ben, Westminster, Houses of Parliament, Statue of Liberty in America. Buildings are erected by powerful people, governments typically, people with the money to pay the architects. So the buildings are a symbol of governmental power. So it's this idea that we need to, those buildings metaphorically in Tissue will fall away on a sigh, that we need a shift in the direction of the wind. What a great metaphor. Changing the way that things are in the world, and that requires us all to come together. Yes, so you're very, very welcome. Very, very welcome. Everything on paper doesn't matter. Yeah, that's a fabulous point, Tyler. The beautiful thing with poetry is that we can all say completely different things. We can all take a different angle and we can all get top marks doing that. So this idea of grocery slips might fly our lives like paper kites. You could go that route with it, that actually these things on paper mean nothing. It's actually living tissue. And that's a quote from the second to last stanza. Living tissue. A structure. This is deep. A structure not meant to last. That's us. We know that as humans, we're born, we die. We're not meant to last. But that power is with us, not in buildings and colossal statues built by Egyptian kings. Because ultimately, at the end of it all, they'll be shattered and decayed and left. And no one's going to care. We define ourselves, we define our future. And actually, I mean, again, in tissue, I don't know how deep you want me to go with this, but she talks about who was born to whom, you know, pages of the Quran mentioning dates and who was born to who. So it's this whole idea again of things being passed down from generation to generation. Ramesses II, you know, Ozymandias, just wanted all that for himself. This big old statue, look upon my works. It's all about him. But what Darker could be saying is that it's all about the kind of the things that we pass down to our children. Okay, let's pray we don't get tissues. If you do, it's that whole thing of take a knee. I don't think you will, but hey, let's be prepared for any outcome. Take a deep breath, look at the opening. Paper is people, simple as that. People who let their light shine through. People who are smoothed and stroked. That's a line that's repeated. Smoothed and stroked, that gentleness. Ozymandias, you know, the hand that mocked and the heart that fed and that sneer and that command. And here we've got this idea, smoothed and stroked, that gentleness is power. Let's love each other. Let's be kind to each other. Let's let our light shine through. Do you love it yet? Do you love tissue yet? It's a great poem once you get it. So we need you as well. We do, Dicko. We'd love you here, but I am holding the fort. Chuck him to the hubby. That's great advice. So I think we've gone pretty deep there. We have, and I'll keep banging on about it. Opening, ending, some images in the middle. But what you want for the 6 and the 7 is that thoughtfulness and that detail. And the way you can go about that is that tentative language, you know. It could be this, it might be that, perhaps, possibly, perhaps Darker is encouraging us to revolt, revolution, in the same way that Blake did. Perhaps Darker is referencing layer over layer, script over luminous script. The idea of script could relate to scriptures. It could be a biblical reference, such as the pages of the Quran as well. The idea that kind of maybe God or the universe or whatever deity you worship wants us to take our power and work together, and that, you know, it contrasts with Ozymandias and it contrasts with My Last Duchess, because these are men who think they're above God, you know, a bit like Macbeth, and we all know what happened to him. So read it properly. Definitely take the time to read. Definitely have a look. Take a deep breath, sit in your pajamas, just have a read of a poem before you go to sleep and have a think about it. But remember, it doesn't really, you just need a range of points. You just need to pick out three or four things that you can talk about. Fabs. Okay, so a couple of minutes to hit me up with any other questions that you might have, and then I think we shall call it an evening, and we'll be back tomorrow with, drum roll, extract from the Prelude, nice little nature poem there, and some Storm on the Island. So please get reading those, have a little skim read of them, so that before we go live tomorrow, you'll already be familiar and have refreshed that little bit. Okie dokie. Fabulous. Emily wants to know if you will date him. Oh goodness, that's not something for a public forum there, Wilmot. He wants a answer. Right, I'm going to butt out of that one. Okay, so thanks for tuning in. Again, feel free to pop us emails if there's anything that's on your mind. And I shall see you same time tomorrow, and also in school tomorrow before that, for some Pidgin English revision. Rivers make roads, rail tracks. Tyler is on fire tonight. What is the significance of it? Is it listing? I think you're onto something there, Tyler. I think the significance of it is that you've got railroads, rail tracks, borderlines, also kind of grocery slips. It's all the ways that we as humans try to assert our power on the world, I suppose. We try and control things, you know. I went on holiday years ago with my nan. I was only young, and I remember being on this river and the people saying, well, that there on that bank of the river is Spain and there is Portugal. So it's mad to think that it's kind of the same land, but that's one country and that's another country. So it's this idea of the rail tracks and all of that. We as humans try to put our mark on the world, but at the end of the day, the sun shines through those borderlines. The daylight breaks through the buildings, all those marks that humans make on the world. And the beautiful part of that poem where she talks about the shapes, the shapes that pride can make. All the shapes that pride can make. The idea the sun and the light shines through all of that. So no matter how many marks we try and make on the world, we're not above nature. We're not that important. We're equal and we're vulnerable and we're fragile, but we can still love each other and be kind. So that's definitely what I would say. And again, Dicko's linking that beautiful link to Blake's London, beautiful link to the Chartered Thames. The idea, Dicko's on fire, pew, 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 nice one. The idea that actually people try to own, I wander through each chartered street in London, down where the Chartered Thames does flow, that oxymoron there. You can't own nature. You can't own water. Water by its nature is flowing. You can't just pick up water. So it's this idea in both poems that we as humans try and control things, but we don't have the right to do that. Certainly some humans feel they have more right than others. And again, that's power and the divide between those in power and those beneath them, if that makes sense. So great question. Absolutely. How did you get the dig filter? I don't have a dig filter. I have a dog filter. Miss Dickinson taught me yesterday. I'm slightly obsessed now. So it's a little face with some kind of starry things, and you press it and you flick along, and up comes the filter. So we can't control nature. We are controlled by it. We are not as powerful as we think. And we see that time and time again, don't we? We see natural disasters. We as humans feel like we are the ones in control, that we have the right to control the world. And these poets are potentially reminding us that actually that's not the case. Actually, nature has the power. The sun shines equally on all of us. So really good there. Well, Mr. Brown's at the gym. Last I heard, Glovebox was going to watch something that she's been waiting for, and merch, I don't know. Thank you, Emily. I thought I was a dog yesterday, but I was a cat. So lovely. Right, well, thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for tuning in, and happy revising. Have a good night.